Hello, everybody, and welcome to the very exciting and unscripted and completely unplanned Michael and Patty podcast. It's all about living in Prince Edward Island. We're going to cover mainly real estate and everything in regards to PEI, left, right, and center, or as we say, the center, up west, down east. Hello, Patty. You're looking wonderful.
Hi, Michael. Thank you for having me on again.
You are our only co-host. We have no one else is on the list. You're it. Today's topic is kind of interesting. Patty's going to be telling us a lot of stuff today, so I'm going to sit back. I'm going to put my seatbelt in, strap myself in. I've got an airbag in front of me. It gets too out of control. We're going to discuss not writing a crappy offer, or as Patty would put it, how would you put it?
Your offer tells a story. And it tells a story about who you are as a buyer. And if you want to have your offer stand out, make sure your realtor is telling a good story about you.
The reason this subject came up is I just received an offer from an agent, and it was just absolutely abysmal. It's the worst offer I've seen in years. And I was looking at this, and this is from an experienced agent, and I think what happened, with all due respect to this agent, that this agent took instructions from the client but didn't really counsel them on how completely ridiculous this offer was. It was asking for documents that didn't exist. It was asking for us to be sitting around for weeks waiting for a lawyer to approve the offer. It was looking for certifications that we had to pay for, but there's no guarantee that the deal's ever going to close. The deposit was like a fraction of 1%. And I like to make stuff work. I know you do.
Mm-hmm.
So I was going to write up a counter offer, but my clients, and I work for them under their instructions, basically said this offer is just a complete piece of crap. Is that a legal term?
But it was just a non-offer.
It was a non-offer. So we rejected it. Typically, you want to keep the lines of communication open. You want to do a counteroffer. You want to talk. In this particular case, this was just like a grenade going off. It's like, boom, here's an offer on a property I showed weeks ago from nowhere. There's no discussion, no nothing. The documents they're asking for, they just had to shoot an email to me and they could have them or download them off MLS. But the offer came from nowhere. There's absolutely zero communication from me trying to get the vendors sort of idea where they want to end up. And there's nothing about this offer that was good. When I told the other agent, there's nothing in this offer that's of any use. It's a nothing burger, as Kevin O'Leary would say. How can I, representing a purchaser, get them, of course, because you work, and we discussed this in other podcasts, your fiduciary responsibility, your obligation typically is to represent your purchaser's needs. How can I get the best deal and write an offer that's going to be attractive to an owner or a vendor or vendors? I'm strapped in.
I know. And right where you were touching on is exactly where you start. So the first thing a buyer's agent, a realtor, should do if they're representing the purchaser is to do their due diligence. Contact the seller's agent. Ask some questions. Find out, what is your client's looking for? What is their preferred closing? How can we help them out? Are they staying on the island? Try to get as much information. One, it postures and positions your purchaser so that they can write a better offer and perceived to give the seller what they want. And two, if it makes the selling experience better. So a strategy, an example in explaining this is if the buyer wants to get the property at a reduced price compared to what the current list price is, and the seller would prefer, and it would make it easier for them because they're downsizing, if a lot of the content got left behind, because then they didn't have to get into moving or selling or doing all that stuff, then it would be advantageous for the purchaser's agent to discover this so that if they want to offer a reduced price on the property within the contract, perhaps give the seller the closing date they want, request that the contents that are acceptable to the seller are included, whatever you're doing to try to create as smooth of an experience for the seller, as well as getting the buyer at the end of the day what they want. So communication is key right on the onset. And like you just said, that was not done. There was no phone calls asking, what is your sellers looking for? Where are your sellers going? Are they upsizing, downsizing? Is there anything that I should know? Anything that would help? Because my clients are definitely interested. That would have made perhaps this whole thing a little bit, maybe, a little bit better of a negotiation, and there may have been a counter in play.
And what about documentation? Where would a real estate agent initially go looking for things like property disclosures, surveys, deeds, whatever the case may be, without actually going on the tax computer and looking up some of those things?
As a realtor, we are responsible as a listing real estate agent to have all those documents on our system is called Paragon. All those documents should be attached there. A good listing should consist of the property details, a geo-ortho map, a property condition disclosure statement, if there is a survey or a plot plan, if there is a list of improvements and updates, they should be nicely conveyed because you don't want those in your overview. Your overview should be about the story of your home. There can be a separate document attached with all the, you've increased your insulation and, you know, all the technical stuff should be separate, but that document could also be attached. If there's contents to be included, there's a lot of things that could be all part of the listing agent's package being offered to a buyer.
And if those documents aren't there?
They're not there. If I'm a buyer's agent, I unfortunately have to reach out to the listing agent, which causes extra time. Is there a property condition disclosure statement that's been filled out? Would your clients be, in agreement to doing that? Let me know the situation. Maybe it's an estate sale or something like that, and that's why there wasn't one. And if it's not the PCDS and it's the government documents that I'm looking for, I look for those myself. I make sure I have those as part of my package. I do as much research as I can for my clients.
What about a coastal erosion report? Would you find that attached to the listing usually?
Not usually, unless it's one of my listings. I do pull those and I will have those on file. I may or may not attach it for no reason other than to follow the instructions of my seller.
And the map's all red and it loses 12 feet per year.
As a buyer's agent, though, there's no reason why they can't. And the province is so good at a quick turnaround time while you're doing your due diligence and looking at the property. If it is a waterfront property, they are great with that. They're very, very helpful here.
Now, when I contact a purchaser or vendor's agent, and I ask them for a bunch of documents and 9,000 different questions about the motivation, if there is any, behind the vendor, do I affect my leverage on the purchaser side?
If you have a list of questions, you've already started to be taxing to the seller. The seller may be, if they're nicely summarized.
No, I'm not talking that type of client. We can talk about that next. What I'm saying is I phone or email the listing agent and I say, do you have a PCDS, a survey, and a deed?
Okay.
Does that affect my leverage from a purchasing?
No.
I believe that some agents feel that by reaching out and asking the listing agent for documentation will imply that they're going to be writing an offer, and then they think, because they're all conspiratorial and they think the listing agent's now going to try to double end the property and represent a buyer and a seller to double their commission, they're affecting their leverage. And I think in most cases that is completely false. And I think if anything, if there was a leverage scale, you've got far more leverage if you communicate with the listing agent than you do playing these games because you're paranoid and you think that by blindsiding the listing agent with an offer of the blue based on conjecture in a lot of cases or lack of facts and documents is going to do your client better is probably the worst way to go for leverage.
I would agree. Now, if you just looked at the property yesterday or the day before and you've already asked your questions and you're submitting an offer. Now, I will say, I've received offers in emails. Emails are not 100% guaranteed. I have had offers received where the agent hasn't either called me or texted me and said, just so you're aware, I've just sent you an offer. Could you please confirm receipt of it? If I don't hear back, if I'm the buyer's agent, I make sure that I call them and follow up with them, because contracts have an expiry time on it. They're valid for 6 hours. They're valid for 24 hours. I want to give that seller as much time as possible to have an opportunity to review that contract and not rely on the agent took 8 hours before they even received the email.
It's part of your conversation as well when you're talking to the listing agent to see if, first of all, the property is even available. Second of all, if they have any other offers, if they're expecting to get any offers, are they holding offers? Do they want the offers open for a week? How long do they want the offers open for? Sometimes the most prudent agents put that on the system. They'll tell you, leave the offer open until this date and time, or leave it open for 72 hours. By submitting an offer at 9 o'clock in the morning, open till 1 o'clock in the afternoon, you're just assuming that everyone's sitting around waiting for you to reach out to them with an offer, and that's what they're going to focus on that morning and put everything off. You're going to piss them off.
That's what I was going to say. How is that perceived as a seller?
I know. The easiest thing for me to do at this junction is just decline the offer and never deal with these people again.
Yes, but how it's perceived is this person's really pushy. They don't see it as, the buyer might think, well, this will let them know I'm really serious and I want this property. But that's not how the seller internalizes it.
And if a property transaction starts off with a purchaser or a vendor that's an agitator, is their attitude going to improve throughout this process?
If it starts off like that, it's probably going to finish on the same note.
And what about, getting back to our earlier question, if you get someone that's an engineer brain, they've never been to the island, never seen the property, and they send you 17 questions. How high's the bank? What color's the sand? How big are the grains of the sand? How many steps lead to the beach? How much insulation is there? Do you know if there's double, triple, or single pane windows? How wide's the driveway in millimeters?
Water pressure.
Yeah, what's the water pressure at the well? By far, I can't even say it on this podcast, probably one of the stupidest questions I've ever received from someone that's never even been to the province. It's like, visit the province, visit some properties, understand how things work before you start inundating agents with questions that some of these questions could take hours or days to respond to. And then what happens when you answer these questions?
Crickets.
You get no thank you, you get no nothing, and then you get maybe 10 more questions.
Yes.
And what are questions? If you ask, a friend of mine from New York City said, if you ask enough questions about anything, you're going to talk your way out of everything. The moral of the story is that would come into play in the offer process later in, not if you haven't even visited the island. It's certainly not something I would be asking a real estate agent in Portugal if I've never even been there and looked at a house.
I can understand asking a few questions, but there's so many great resources out there that are available that they can do their due diligence. They can use, most properties can be viewed by Google Street Views. Okay, back to the contracts. The buyer's agent should have great communication with the listing agent to try to posture and position the client's contract agreement. So that is the first thing, and that is one step that is often missed. The next thing is your contract actually tells a story. The way you structure your clauses and the clauses that you put in lets myself, who is predominantly a listing agent, it tells me a story about the confidence of this and the quality of this buyer. If they're pushing financing out or their home inspection out a week or 2 weeks past financing, that tells me they're not confident with their financing, or they wouldn't be worried about enduring the cost of booking a home inspection and having everything all aligned with one date. That I see quite often on the island. And in my opinion, that lets me know that this buyer is not a strong buyer. Would you agree with that?
I agree. So when you write a contract, basically it's price, deposit, financing clause, typically home inspection clause, water test, which is usually provided by the vendor. That's about it.
Septic.
What's included? Septic inspection, which really isn't even an inspection, but they do look at the tank. We've discussed that in our epic septic podcast. It's well worth a listen. You have to listen to that one. Those are what they're looking for. But in essence, it's all about communication. I, as a listing agent, predominantly love to see offers that have been discussed, may it be for a couple hours or weeks. I've done offers or done deals that have taken 6 or 8 months. But at the end of the day, it comes in, we sign it, it's done, and there's no problems. That's what I like to see. What I don't like to see is a pile of crap that there's been no communication. The purchaser's agent is paranoid and thinks that the world is against him or her. And I don't know what to do with this offer. I want to put it together, but there's just nothing there to work on. There's no elements to use.
Okay. There's one clause within our contract agreement that really is
the lawyer's paragraph.
Yes.
I'll let you address that.
So within our contract agreements, and just so the listeners know, our contracts have been written by lawyers over the years, and they are to protect both the buyer and the seller. They are created to be fair so that both parties can feel that they have representation within this contract agreement. They are not written to be biased to one party when you're dealing with a realtor. If you're getting into private sales, that's a whole other thing. Obviously, a seller lawyer or a buyer's lawyer is going to be preparing that contract, being biased and protecting the client that they're representing. But our contract agreements, when you're working with the realtor, are meant to be fair so both parties feel that they have representation. There is a clause within our contract that we're talking about, which is a solicitor's approval. The solicitor's approval clause technically is about protecting the realtor just in case we feel we may have missed something, and we just want the lawyer to cover our backs and be able to answer the questions that the client has. So they're not coming from us, they're coming from the lawyer. Would you say that would be the whole pretense of where that clause came from?
In our Schedule A, which is attached to the purchase and sale agreement, it has a clause that says this contract is subject to the purchaser's lawyer reviewing the contract and finding it acceptable. To me, and this is what I usually say, is if you want your lawyer to review the contract, do it before you submit the offer, because you're just adding yet one more contingency that's going to make me as a seller want to find another buyer that's not so problematic. Now, usually what you'll hear is, well, he doesn't want to run it by his lawyer because it might cost him money to do so. Well, what flag does that raise? When I look at the $2,000 deposit on $750,000 house, where the typical deposit in North America is 5% to 10%.
You're back to not having a qualified, strong buyer.
Right. So if that clause is in there, it's basically saying this contract is worth absolutely zero. And if a lawyer is good, which most of them are, except one, they're going to find something that's an issue in those contracts. I can find something of issue in all those contracts. Anyone can nitpick any contract to find something wrong with them. So it's highly irregular. Wouldn't you agree that a lawyer's going to say, yep, Patty, this is the best contract they've ever seen. It's 100% perfect. Nothing needs to be changed. Let's sign her off.
No.
So the paragraph is there, and some agents have a hard time understanding this. It's there to protect the agents. In other words, I can say as a purchaser's agent, well, there's the paragraph. They had an opportunity to keep that in and have their lawyer review it. They didn't want the lawyer to review it. That's why they crossed it off. That's why they wrote omit. That's why they initialed the omission. They had the right to do that. Would that be a fair statement?
Yes. Yeah, I would say so. Why was that clause originally introduced?
I don't know the premise or the basis of when the clause was introduced. I don't have that.
It was introduced when it came to land. It only used to be a part of our Schedule A land contracts because land is a lot more complicated. And again, to indemnify the realtor, if there was any due diligence, any questions, anything maybe the realtor missed as introducing an additional clause to the contract, that's what that original clause was inserted for. Our new updated contracts that have been out for 2 years or so now, they've used that clause, and because the discussion was there are residential properties that do have maybe some land that could be a little more complicated, or the usage of the land, or maybe additional clauses However, there are realtors that insert that because they don't understand what that clause is actually about and for just a straightforward residential property.
Is I have it in there. I'll ask, why is this paragraph in there? Well, it's in there to protect my client.
From what?
I have no idea. And I say the same thing. Just if you're worried about protecting your client, have your lawyer review the contract before you submit it. But why would you have another contingency that I have to deal with on the listing side that makes your offer less acceptable,
less desirable?
I want an offer that's, here's the check, we're going to close in 30, 60, 90 days. Now, getting back to the offer, in closing, the purchaser agent talks to the vendor's agents. They discuss what they're concerned about. It may not be the money. Their concern may be it's a cottage. We inherited it. We don't want it. It smells. And we just want it gone and closed in 2 weeks. Are you the people that can do this? We don't care about the money. We care about the closing. We want a clean contract. We don't want to go through home inspections, water tests, septic inspections, surveys, plot plans, whatever, erosion tests, erosion reports. We want a clean deal. The money doesn't matter. This we would find out with the communication, amongst other things, right?
100%.
And then we manufacture a purchase and sale that is a little cleaner and doesn't have lawyers' approval on it. And then hopefully we get it accepted. Everybody's happy.
Absolutely.
One final question. I phone up, or I'm the purchaser's agent or a purchaser. Purchasers shouldn't phone the listing agent because they may give away their bargaining leverage. As a purchaser's agent, I talk to the listing agent, say, what will they take for it? Are they motivated? How desperate are they? What does a proper listing agent say?
Proper listing agent would say, my client has offered the property at X amount of dollars, as you see on the MLS. I do not negotiate on my client's behalf without their consent and permission. If you would like to put forth an offer, I can bring that to my clients and let them decide how they would like to proceed.
Unless the owners have given the listing agent the permission or the latitude to convey certain facts or information, negotiating tools, for instance, we'll knock 50 grand off if you close in 30 days, or we'll knock 10 grand off if you take all the furnishings and you can keep the smell for free, things like this. But they can't negotiate. They can't even say, well, it's on for 500. The listing agents can't say, well, we're not taking 480. Well, it's not you. That message has to be conveyed. All offers, whether they're on a proper purchase and sale, written by a lawyer, written on the back of a coffee cup or an email or text, have to be submitted to the vendors regardless, and they need to respond to it, not the listing agent.
Yes, I agree.
Is that it?
That sounds like, yes. Hopefully we've conveyed what a good offer is, what a bad offer, a little bit of details and a little insight into what some of our contract clauses are, what you can expect, and know what to ask for next time in your buyer's agent and listing agent when you are looking to sell or buy a property.
And if we're looking for the best deal, write a clean offer.
I agree. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.